It's the Draft Fellows coming at you live. Kyle and Andrew breaking down the drive. Prospects to roster, we got the flow. First round picks to the ones you don't know. Talk about the combine, skills on display. Who's rising up and who's falling away. Roster building like a GM in the zone. Kyle Fellows, Andrew Mertig, they own the phone.
Hey, welcome back to the Draft Fellows podcast. I'm Andrew Mertig, without Kyle Fellows again this week. But together we are the Draft Fellows. Make sure you're checking out the Draft Fellows channel on YouTube or your favorite audio podcasting platform. And since I don't have Kyle today, I wanted to revisit a topic that him and I have broached many times, and that is the unique situation of roster building that is happening and has continued to happen with the New Orleans Saints. And of course, there are other franchises that have chosen to push money into future cap years to keep their roster together. But certainly New Orleans has taken this to a completely different level. And today I want to lay out a way for them to finally get themselves out from under the boot of the salary cap. And the first thing I think you need to address is, could this team compete in 2025? Because if that's the case, they may continue to push money into future years to make themselves cap compliant and be able to sort of keep their head above water if they feel like they're entering into a new competitive window. First thing is Vegas, which is not perfect, but it is a good metric to take a look at, has the Saints betting line at 6.5 wins. And I think that's a pretty fair assessment looking at their roster and their schedule. And this is still a good set of offensive weapons. The offensive line should be really good, and the defense has a few plus players. But I can also see a trajectory where the wheels really fall off and that under hits. The quarterback situation could certainly be a disaster. Alvin Kamara could finally show his age. The wide receivers could just never get back to healthy this season. And an aging defense could show rapid decline. And so, there is a way to see this team getting 9 wins, but I think the ceiling of the team, and that's if everything I mentioned goes really well, it doesn't seem to be high enough to be a serious contender. So that leaves me with the conversation today of how they could really accelerate a rebuild. And the Saints have already been the reality of the situation is they're going to have $48.6 million in dead cap for 2026. That is almost 15% of their cap, which is already committed to players who either won't be on the roster or who probably shouldn't be on the roster, right? Like, they could extend some of those players that have big dead cap hits and then push it even further into the future. I just think that's really irresponsible. And on top of that, with that huge dead cap hit, they're projected to be $19 million over the cap. So I think they can make some moves. Number one, if they're really responsible for the rest of 2025 and don't take on any more unnecessary salary, they could roll over about $30 million in cap space. That can really help them to overcome that $19 million that they're already over. And, of course, there's a potential that the cap increases more than what the current projections are. It has the last couple of years. And so that's more than enough to make up for the amount they're over the cap and be able to sign a draft class and then fill out the bottom of your roster with minimum contracts. But that involves tightening your belt in a way the Saints just have not been willing to do under Mickey Loomis. And I think there's another way to accentuate that, and they could improve their chances in the 2026 draft by making some trade deadline moves. So if they are clearly out of contention, could the Saints consider trading a player like Alvin Kamara, who would be very valuable to a contender, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, maybe even Chris Olave? And that is, of course, if he is healthy. And that would help them to field a more competitive team in 2026. You would get them a little bit of salary reprieve for 2025, which then they, in theory, could could roll over as well, and then remove a little bit of the temptation to keep these roster cornerstones. Now, I know all of those players would be very painful to lose. Olave being a young ascending talent who just, the head injuries are scary, and that is unfair, but it is the reality of the situation. And then roster cornerstones, franchise legends in Kamara, Demario Davis, and Cam Jordan. Those would all be very difficult moves to make, but I would advocate that some, or maybe even all, of those would actually make this a much more healthy roster going forward. So, in my particular strategy, you basically have to let all of your 2026 free agents walk. So, the alternative is extending out even more money. So, I think there's one exception here, but basically you'd have to say goodbye to a player like wide receiver Rashid Shaheed, tight end Taysom Hill, Foster Moreau, and then if they're not traded, Demario Davis and Cam Jordan. The one exception that I mentioned, Trevor Penning, who has not lived up to his first round billing, but if he has a big bounce back year, which is very possible. This is a player who had a lot of talent, obviously, first round pick. If he looks really solid, maybe that's a player that you want to make an exception for to bring back, because that's somebody who could potentially be on your roster when the rebuild is complete. So there is a lot of value in that. And obviously, they invested pretty heavily in Penning. Now, the Saints, this would require them to field a lot of rookies in 2026. Potentially, you make these trades and you're going to have a large draft class. You're going to be able to fill the roster with UDFAs and really follow that hard reset that the LA Rams attempted in 2023. Although, in fairness, the Rams were so much better that year than anybody thought. And that would be like the really hopeful outlook. Maybe Spencer Rattler takes a step forward, or maybe Tyler Shuck is a decent quarterback prospect, or maybe you have a high pick and you take a chance on a guy in a deep 2026 class that you believe in and can be the future of your quarterback position. So that's a really hopeful outlook, that like you have something there and you can kind of build around that. The 2026 season would almost certainly be very rough. I talked about all of those players that are on their way out. Basically, all of your core veteran players that have been there for a long time. You're not bringing in any like medium or high price free agents in this situation. But if you want to take a look at the optimistic view of 2026, you have a good young O line. Maybe you have a rookie quarterback to put behind them, and you can start to assess this roster. Maybe you sign some low risk minimum contract free agents. You're given a chance to. They're coming here to get playing time and then maybe get paid down the line. And you can get your young players significant playing time to continue their development. And here's the sunshine at the end of the tunnel. If you are responsible, you tighten your belt for 25 and 26. In 2027, the Saints could have zero dead cap. Unheard of for this Saints team. And a projected $149 million in cap space. So they could take some major swings in free agency in the 27 offseason. They could secure any young talent that emerges and have room to take on some aggressive trades. So I understand this is the anti-Mickey Loomis strategy, but this is what gives New Orleans the best chance to escape this cycle of mediocrity and gives themselves a chance to return to greatness in the medium-term future. Now, if ownership or Mickey Loomis or Kellen Moore and this coaching staff would be patient enough to do it, I don't know. I have no idea if any of those three entities, and it would take all three being on board with this, right? Like Kellen Moore is not going to agree to this massive roster teardown if his job's going to be in jeopardy before they have a chance to field a competitive team in 2027. Mickey Loomis certainly hasn't shown a willingness to do this, and ownership is sort of just following along with this Loomis strategy. So if they're willing to do this, I think this is the smart way to go. If not, they're just going to continue to be a mediocre team going forward. I do think that this is the way to fix the roster for the Saints going forward. And yeah, it's going to involve some painful moments over the next 24 months. But I think it would be really, really valuable and bring a lot of optimism back to this franchise that certainly needs it at this point. So That's the way that I would fix the Saints. If you see any way that you disagree, any other options that you think might help accelerate this process, feel free to leave those in the chat. But I appreciate you joining me. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show, and as we continue to discuss roster building, and we will be beginning our preview of the 2026 NFL Draft in the coming weeks. But from the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.
Kyle got the insight, Andrew brings the heat. Breaking down the roster every single week. Catch us on the podcast, we coming through your speakers. Top picks for practice squad, we got the seekers. Team dynamics, contracts, and the trades. From the draft day excitement to the accolades. Draft fellows on the track, we gone strong. Analyze the plays, we can't be wrong. From the 40-yard dash to the longest throw. We talking pro ball, yeah, you know.